Good evening, welcome to the Buck Stops here. I'm Vishnu Shom. On the program this evening, outrage across the political spectrum and online after Congress leader Raj Babbar says 5 rupees is enough to buy a proper meal in Mumbai, while Congress Rajya Sabha MP Rashid Masood says with 12 rupees you can buy a meal in Delhi. The Congress has distanced itself from these remarks and Raj Babbar has apologized, but the larger issue remains, why would political leaders make such outrageous statements in the first place? Also coming up on the program, 5 brothers and a sister are thrown out of their village in Pratapgarh in UP after their parents died of AIDS. They end up living in a tent next to the graves of their parents. This is India 2013. Another shocking story of how young, vulnerable children who cannot protect themselves are victims of absurd stigma. But first, there are now clear indicators that the Congress party is ready to announce a decision soon on Telangana. According to sources, the Andhra Pradesh Chief Minister Kiran Kumar Reddy has been informed of the decision taken by Sonia Gandhi. There is a sense that there may be a backlash from dissenting Congress leaders. That's what the central leadership of the Congress is looking out for right now. The Congress in charge for Andhra Pradesh, Digvijay Singh, today said the process of consultation was over. The ramifications of any decision that the government takes on Telangana will be huge, is an announcement now around the corner. Joining me now to discuss this, my colleagues Sunil Prabhu and Uma Sudhir. Sunil, to you first. How soon do we expect a decision one way or the other?
I think the decision has been taken, Vishnu, as you rightly said, and the Congress President through a General Secretary, Mr. Digvijay Singh, as well as Mr. Ghulam Nabi Azad, who's an old hand in Andhra Pradesh, conveying it to the top state Congress leaders this afternoon. And then of course they did discuss it at the core group. The question is, how do you go ahead and roll it out? An early decision seems unlikely because we have a parliament session which is starting on the 5th of August. There is a commitment that the Congress President has made. You need a CWC decision to be taken, and then of course the UPA Coordination Committee, the UPA decision, then of course a cabinet decision requesting the President, and it carries on. It's a long, lengthy process. So it's difficult to give a timeline, but we could see it playing out not immediately before Parliament, but somewhere down the line towards the end of August, where we could see a final decision being taken. First of all, of course, they need to test the waters. They need to understand what the reaction will be from the Andhra and the Rayalaseema region, and then of course they will go ahead and take that huge political call, which has huge ramifications not only for the state of Andhra Pradesh but also for the country.
Uma, let me ask you this. December 9th, 2009, a decision had been taken by the UPA that Telangana would become a reality. At that stage, there was incredible opposition to this in Andhra Pradesh. Is there a sense now that the opposition that one is seeing is considerably less than what it was back in 2009, which is why a decision for Telangana might be easier for Sonia Gandhi and the Congress party?
Yes, Vishnu. In fact, fingers crossed is what everyone in Telangana who's been asking for a separate state of Telangana would tell you, because of the kind of flip-flops that have happened. Announcement on the 9th of December 2009, incidentally that was Sonia Gandhi's birthday, and it was thought to be a present from Sonia Gandhi to the people of Telangana, and then the turnaround which the Congress did after the MPs and MLAs from that region threatened to resign. This time round as well, there is a lot of apprehension, there is a lot of doubt, even though all indications seem to say that bifurcation is really going to happen. What we understand is that the discussions today were around whether it should be limited to the 10 districts of Telangana, or it should be 10 plus 2 districts of Rayalaseema on one side and 2 districts of Rayalaseema plus the rest of coastal Andhra Pradesh on the other. So the state in a sense is equally divided and they are equally poised in many senses. But the worry for the Congress is really going to be how far will these Congress MPs and MLAs who are opposed to division of the state really go? Will they go the whole way, or is this only political posturing? The Congress, we understand, the leadership is actually individually calling up MPs, leaders, sections of the leadership who they believe could cause trouble, and say that they need to abide by the party leadership. And that's also one reason, Vishnu, I would think, why there is a delay in decision, because the Congress does not want yet another embarrassment where after a decision is known to have been publicly taken, they are forced to retrieve the steps. Vishnu. All
right, Uma and Sunil, thank you both very much for joining us. Now on to a big debate this evening. Why on earth would two Congress leaders, both MPs, Raj Babbar and Rashid Masood, make independent statements that in Mumbai a poor person can buy a meal for 12 rupees and in Delhi for just 5 rupees in a certain part of Delhi? The BJP has slammed these statements, and there is a sense of utter outrage online. And the Congress has distanced itself from the remarks which have once again brought to the fore the controversy over the poverty mark, which pegs daily consumption in villages of 27 rupees 20 paise above the poverty mark and 33 rupees 33 paise in urban areas as being above the poverty mark. Anything below, you're considered poor. But the mark itself, a lot of people say, is very, very low, both in urban areas and in village areas, rural areas. It's brought this entire series of comments, has brought that entire controversy back to the forefront.
The latest utterances of the Congress party leaders is shocking.
तो ये सारी चीजें गरीबी का मजाक उड़ाने जैसी हैं.
That is just factually incorrect, and I think it is insensitive.
The flak from its political rivals pushed the Congress into damage control. The party today distanced itself from the controversial 5 rupee and 12 rupee for a meal statements of Raj Babbar and Rashid Masood, and also took the opportunity to hit back at the BJP. Congress General Secretary Ajay Makhan tweeted, "We do not agree with the rupees 15 and rupees 5 statement of some leaders. The BJP criticizing the 33.3 rupee poverty line should explain why it was 16.73 rupees in the 59th NSSO survey of 2003 and accepted by the BJP NDA government." Soon after came the apology from Raj Babbar for his remark that he can still get a full meal in Mumbai for 12 rupees. In a statement he has said, "If my statement has pained someone, then I regret it. I don't want that my statement in any way harms the party."
राज बब्बर जी ने कैटेगोरिकली स्टेटमेंट दिए हैं कि वो रिग्रेट करते हैं, और मैं सोचती हूँ यही मुनासिब है कि उस मामला को वहाँ छोड़ दे. कम से कम उन्होंने पहचान लिया.
But as NDTV found out, the joke on the poor of the country is still upsetting many.
बोल रहे जहाँ मजे तो नहीं मिलता है. हाँ, तो उनसे कहीं खुद खा लो ना, खा के दिखाओ एक दिन.
पहले पुराने जमाने में मिलता था, अब तो 5 रुपए में क्या मिलता है. ये जमाना और महंगाई दिन पर दिन होती जा रही है.
We finally managed to get something for 5 rupees. These are 3 pakoras precisely. And I'm beginning to wonder if this is the idea of a full meal according to the Congress MP.
Given that Rashid Masood shares his birth date with India's Independence Day, the 15th of August 1947, one can well excuse him for still being nostalgic about the food prices from way back then. But the most unforgiving seems to be the social media, which launched an all-out attack on the insensitive remarks by Babbar and Masood. Sample this. Ashok Dhamija tweets, "Why 12 rupees or 5? You can get a full meal for free in Delhi. Gurudwara Langar. So poverty is down to 0. Or this one from Ashwin Mushran, who says, "Things you can get in 12 rupees, 12 1 rupee coins and a laugh." Or then this tweet from S. Roy 1987, who's come up with a whole new menu.
The controversy regarding the 12 rupees and 5 rupees a meal remarks may have forced Raj Babbar to express regret, for Masood to backtrack, and for the Congress to hit back at the BJP. But will this enable the party to win the perception battle when it comes to the crucial issue of poverty? Well, that can be a food for thought for the ruling class. In New Delhi, with camera person Kamal Khan, Sonal Mehrotra, NDTV.
So what really was the meaning of those remarks? Now, one of those leaders, Raj Babbar, has distanced himself. He's apologized in a sense for those remarks. The Congress has distanced itself from both of these remarks. But why on earth would they be made in the first place when it appears to be patently incorrect? Joining us to debate this, Lalita Kumar Mangalam, spokesperson of the BJP, Sanjay Jha, spokesperson of the Congress party, also joins us. Panda, Lok Sabha MP of the BJD, is with us as well. Arvind Panagriya, Professor of Economics at Columbia University, joins us all the way from New York. Thank you, sir, very much for being with us. And Professor Y.K. Alag, Vice Chairman of the Sardar Patel Institute of Economic and Social Research and former member of the Planning Commission, with us. Thank you all very much for joining us. Sanjay Jha, let me come to you first. Why would Raj Babbar and Rashid Masood make these remarks in the first place? Quite besides the insensitivity of the remarks, they're factually entirely incorrect. You can't get anything in Jama Masjid for 5 rupees, and you certainly cannot get a proper meal in Mumbai for 12 rupees.
Vishnu, I think you're slightly 24 hours behind schedule on this particular content, because end of day, I think you've already heard the Congress official position. So I don't think debating the personal observations of a couple of leaders really changes the context of the discussion. So I think that is already behind us. The point that I would like to make, is it really behind us? Sanjay, I'm sorry to interrupt, but is it really behind us if there are a huge political reaction across the country? Online, the Congress party is being slammed for these remarks. How can you say just distancing themselves from these remarks is enough for the Congress? Why would these leaders, responsible leaders, including a spokesperson of your party, actually make a remark like this in the first place? Well, let me tell you. Yes. I mean, if Mr. Raj Babbar or Mr. Masood or Mr. Farooq Abdullah have had any access to food or anything in their personal experience, that is for them to answer, which is exactly what Renuka Chaudhary today categorically stated. But let me just put one fundamental point here, because your headline for today's discussion, Vishnu, says the poverty numbers are, or that's what you're alluding to, are suspect. You can discuss this, but after this opening statement, you can ask anybody whatever they like. Over the last 9 years that UPA has been basically administering India, for 4 years, we have reached almost 9.5% GDP growth rate. In other years, it's been also significant. Last 2 years, it's been 6.5, 6.2, and around 5%. You're struggling at 5% now, GDP growth. Now, it is common sense. Sanjay, I mean, it is common. Let me tell you, over a 9 year. Yes, the poverty estimation is over an 8-year period, Vishnu. So now when you look at the fundamentals, an economy which is growing at such a furious pace, are we surprised that poverty has come down? Not at all. This is the government that has spent the maximum of any government on social welfare. We have also improved deliveries. So a combination of high GDP, a combination of good social welfare allocations like Manrega, and better delivery systems leading to a reduction in poverty. By the way, on the same statistical measure of Mr. Suresh Tundalkar's poverty line, that is the standard measure. Yeah, so we'll debate the merits of that number. So the reduction, one last point. Yeah. So the reduction of 137 million people moving out of the poverty line is a moment for us to feel proud as a nation, where poverty has been a challenge. Here we are I have actually had BJP spokespeople actually contesting a planning commission and NSSO figure. No, we'll get into that debate later, but Lalita Kumar Mangalam, does that response satisfy you? Because what he's saying is that, look, there's a larger issue over here, the Congress has distanced itself from these remarks, let's move on, why just focus on this? But my initial question was, how can two apparently responsible leaders make these statements in the first place? No, let me just interrupt here. Let Lalita answer. Let Lalita I'll come back to you, Sanjay. Lalita, go ahead. Who's a potential leader of his party use terms like puppy? How can a leader who's a potential leader of his party talk about burqa of secularism? It's the same answer. Somebody has to explain. Let the individuals explain it. So that justifies anything. But what have they told? Completely different context. The blame on the BJP. Okay, all right. That was a bit of a barb over there, Sanjay. But Lalita, go ahead. It's not just Congress versus BJP. Yeah, this is not just Congress versus BJP. The problem is that as it is in this country, as you well know, politicians don't really have a very good public reputation. We are supposed to be generally dealing, about your party. And when people who are in positions of influence, that's just what I'm saying, this is not Congress versus BJP, this is across the stream. Everybody seems to think all politicians are irresponsible and venal and corrupt and absolutely don't give a, sorry for the language, but don't really care about the poor in this country. When you have three people who are in positions of such responsibility in the party that is today governing this country, come up with such ridiculously laughable and utterly contemptuous statements, what do you think the public is going to think about us? All of us are going to be tarred with the same brush, whether we actually are party to those statements or not. And please let's remember one thing,
Once you say something, you can apologize from here to kingdom come. It's said. You can't really take those words back. And the point also is that both Mr. Raj Babbar and everybody else, they are not really apologizing to the people whom they've insulted. They are just apologizing because their party is getting into trouble.
No, but they say that if they've caused any hurt to anybody, then that is, so Raj Babbar says his apology is genuine. He doesn't want to cause hurt to anybody.
Yeah, but that anybody can say.
Alright, so basically the point that you're saying is that, look, that's not good enough.
You can say anything you want,
let me put that across to Jay Panda. Jay Panda, are we making too much of this entire, yes, perhaps these comments may have been irresponsible. Is it time to move on and debate poverty as we'll do in this debate? Or should we just keep focusing on these remarks which a lot of people say are utterly insensitive?
I just wanted to quickly say, Mr. Jha was pointing out about the UPA's policies and growth which have reduced poverty. I think I can't resist pointing out that if you look at the poverty reduction figures, the most significant reduction have happened in states that are not governed by the UPA. My state, Odisha, has had the single largest reduction, 25% in the last 9 years. The second biggest drop in poverty has been in the state of Bihar. So let's not make this political. Let's not talk about UPA versus other political parties. Now, regarding the leaders who have made these comments, you know, I don't believe in hitting at people who are already down. They've already expressed their regret or apologies. Their own party has contradicted them. So there's really no point in hitting at them any further. But I think it needs to be said that all of us in the political class need to be more sensitive. And here I want to make a very important point.
Absolutely,
we always keep coming back to the poverty line, and whether that is rational and realistic or not, the reality is throughout the world there exist certain norms. And the most common norms are either $1.25 per day per person or $2 per day per person. And there's no reason why India should not adopt those norms. And that sets the poverty line at significantly higher than where we have put it.
Okay, let me just put that question, because and I'm glad you've directed this debate in this particular course, because I want to debate the poverty number itself, the poverty mark. Professor Arvind Panagaria, one of the finest poverty economists in the world, Professor of Economics at Columbia University, joins us. Professor Panagaria, you have written in the past and you have defended the Tendulkar report in the past as well. You believe that there is a great deal of merit in the number which was arrived at, like a little bit more than 33 rupees in urban areas, 27 rupees approximately in rural areas. But a lot of people, including Jay Panda, who you just heard now, say that that number is unacceptably low. How do you respond?
Well, look, you know, Jay also said that he is quite okay with this $25 poverty line that is internationally used. But actually our poverty line is, if anything, slightly above that $25, because $25 is being calculated at the purchasing power parity, not at the exchange rate. So we are certainly doing, actually, in fact, the World Bank has more or less followed our poverty line and converted it into purchasing power parity equivalent of dollars. So I think, you know, Jay should really agree on that. I mean, in most cases I actually agree with Jay on everything. And this poverty line is certainly defensible because, you know, it is grounded in a particular poverty basket. And if you look up, what we have not done actually is to look up at what people at that poverty line are actually consuming.
48 kilos of cereal. That's what you've written about. Right? For a family of 5, about 48 kilos of cereal.
Wait, I'll tell you. Right. Correct. In fact, I mean, or I'll give you for one person, 9.5 kilogram of cereal, about 700 grams of lentils, and you have about 3.5 kilograms of milk, and then about 35 rupees or so. This is at 2009-10 prices, so I don't have the figures for 11-12 prices. So at 2009-10 prices, you got these physical quantities consumed, some eggs also. This is a certainly survivable basket. I have often, what I have pitched is that, look, we need to keep track of what are we doing to the abject poor. Are we making progress there or not? And for measuring progress about the abject poor, I think this is about the right poverty line. It is consistent with the $25
let me just put that to Professor Y.K. Alag. Professor Panagria, I'll come to you in a moment, but you've raised lots of points. Professor Alag, is calorie count enough in terms of measuring poverty? Professor Panagria speaks about how 48 kilos of cereals will serve 5 members of a family, 2009-2000 statistics, but a lot of his critics would say that he needs to focus perhaps less on just calorie count and more on quality of life. Where do you come in on this, sir?
Well, the calorie count business really goes back to the Tendulkar committee, which in turn goes back to what we call the official poverty line, which came from what is called the Alag task force at the end of the 70s of the last century. And I've been arguing from the end of the 80s that that poverty line did serve a purpose then, but now you need to look at this issue de novo. In fact, when the Lakrawala committee was set up, that was its main terms of reference. Also, when the Tendulkar committee was set up, we asked them to look at this. We asked them to redefine the poverty line. And what Suresh really did was, he said that the urban poverty line of the earlier official poverty line becomes the national poverty line. Now, I think Arvind Panagria is absolutely right that as far as the present is concerned, a lot of the critiques seem to be missing all of this, but there is an issue that has been raised from the late 80s that we need a fresh definition of the poverty line, which is the point that you are making. And that has not been done, although it has been the terms of reference both of the Lakrawala committee as well as the Tendulkar committee. Now we've set up this issue for Professor Rangarajan. I don't know whether Ranga has the time to
the
get
deadline is 2014.
This issue does need to be looked into.
The deadline is 2014
but one
for
thing,
that
let me
report.
make it clear, and I agree with Arvind on that, which is that whatever measure you take, there is a lot of evidence to suggest that there has been a decline in the poverty numbers. The absolute level, as you said, the Planning Commission has already decided to set up another group under Rangarajan. Unfortunately, neither the Lakrawala committee nor the Tendulkar committee went into that issue. But I think a poverty line which was developed in the mid-70s does need to be looked at again in terms that you are raising, which is the quality of life and other indicators.
Professor Panagria, would you agree that when we define poverty, we just look at these hard numbers?
Yeah.
And it needs to be a more holistic approach to defining poverty, which accounts for India in 2013. There is an aspirational goal of people, irrespective of how much they actually earn and how much they actually eat. How do these numbers reflect that, sir?
Right. So look, don't get me wrong.
No.
What I'm saying is that we have to measure what is happening to the people who are in abject poverty, and that I do not want to lose out. So I have actually suggested that for aspirational levels we could have a second poverty line also, so that we at least keep track of what is happening to the abject poor, and then also through from an aspirational point of view. Also, don't forget that the Tendulkar poverty line does actually take into account the medical expenditures, educational expenditures. So it's wrong to say that we are not taking into, it's only food that we are accounting for. But having said that, I have nothing against actually having a second poverty line which could be more aspirational. But I would not like to lose track of the fact that, look, we are making this incredible progress. I mean, by bringing in this poverty line issue in the middle of these numbers, we are missing the big story, which is that the poverty decline has been just incredible in the last 7 years. You got 6 states where 20 percentage point decline in poverty between 2004-05 and 11-12. Unprecedented. It is a big story. Bihar, 20 percentage point decline in poverty here. Orissa, of course, is the biggest one that Jay pointed out. I mean, these are the states which are relatively poor, and Bihar being the poorest. Bihar today has actually achieved the poverty level of the average of India in 2004-05. I mean, in 7 years, Bihar, which was at the bottom, suffering that much poverty, is now at the Indian average of 2004-05. In fact, the only state which is among the 17 largest states that is left 2 percentage point above the 2004-05 average of India is Chhattisgarh. But that's 39 versus the 37.
Professor Panagraya, let me just go across to average of India. Let me just go across to Lalita Kumar Mangalam. As you listen in on these facts, I mean, to me, it just seems that the politicization of the discourse on poverty is nothing but political points, brownie points, which the Congress or the BJP or other parties try and get. Do you accept what Professor Panagraya is saying?
I said this earlier in an earlier discussion, Vishnu, that poverty is not just about calorific intake. It also has to be, as you pointed out, more holistic. A poor person is not able to not access only food. It's also about housing, clothing, sanitation, water, education and medical care. And even if you say that this level of 33 rupees and 27.20 is okay for the urban and rural areas respectively, can you tell me which individual in this country can access all these things? A fair amount. I'm not saying they have to live like kings, but not live like paupers on this amount.
That's a valid point. So let me ask.
Basically, I think
let me ask that question. Let me ask that question.
Push the number of people who.
But Lalita, let me ask that question. Let me go back to Professor Panagraya very briefly. Let me go back to Professor Panagraya. Why don't you answer that question? Where do people actually get all of these resources at once? Yeah, go ahead.
These are basic necessities.
Look, let us not confuse the two issues. There are two issues here. One is whether we are making progress. And in the last 7 years, with this very rapid growth of about 8.5%, we have made a huge progress. Let's not ignore that. Now, are we done? No, not by a long shot. There's a long way to go. So, if Lalita is pointing out to the problems that still exist, I have no difficulty with that. In fact, this is why we need this growth actually to keep continuing, so that you have the revenue, so that the government can actually build on these social programs, education, health, toilets, everything else. So there's a huge set of issues here.
Lalita has a point, Professor Panagraya.
Let us not forget the progress that we have actually made.
Let us not forget the progress, but go ahead, Lalita, with the point you're making.
Professor, with all due respect to you, sir, you are an expert on this and I'm not. But as a lay person, I'd like to ask you, sir, that aspirational desires, we can even put those aside. I'm talking about the basic necessity, that the basic rights, if you want to put it that way. A human being in India or an Indian has a right to expect food, clothing, a roof over his or her head, some access to basic health care, at least basic education and water. Where do we have this? And sanitation. 33 rupees is not enough to buy a square meal for one person in most places. If you go to subsidized tiffin centers like we have here in Tamil Nadu, then maybe you will get for 5 rupees a plate of idli and sambar. But it's not enough for people to really live. Not call them poor.
Okay. All right, Professor Panagraya, reply to the point that she's making. These numbers are unrealistic is what she is saying. They're not achievable. They cannot, people do not get what they really seek in that money.
Go ahead.
No, I don't think that's what Arvind is saying.
No, we can argue this till kingdom come.
Professor Alag, I'll come to you in a moment.
Actually.
But Professor Panagraya,
that Arvind Panagraya is making.
Okay, 1 minute.
He's making a very clear one, and he's right.
Go ahead, Professor Alag, yes.
Arvind is absolutely right. The level of the poverty line is a matter which needs to be debated, but there is no question that whichever measure you use, during the last few years, there has been a decline. There was a study done in the Planning Commission which shows that irrespective of the measures that you use, the trend that you get is the same. So even if you bring in more of housing, more of health, it is extremely likely that the trend of decline that he is saying, and as he says, some of it is very dramatic, will be a fall. and that is a separate question from the level. So let's not confuse those two issues. Arvind Panagri is absolutely right on trying to draw the distinction.
Thank you, Professor Alag.
Level
Appreciate it.
which you set for the poverty line and the rate of change.
Jay Panda, respond to that. The numbers, all numbers indicate that the situation is improving dramatically. In your own state you spoke about how poverty numbers have come down dramatically. But do you accept the argument that is being made over here that look, let's just look at these numbers not from a political standpoint but from a realistic economic standpoint, they make a great deal of sense?
I accept it partially. I in fact agree with what Professor Alag just said and what Professor Panagaria said. Let's take the case of Odisha. Using the poverty line that has been talked about, we've had a 25% reduction of poverty. But obviously we would prefer a higher poverty line because we see from practical experience in the field, interacting with my constituents and others, that this is not getting them the basic amenities as we feel it ought to. So if we were to use a higher poverty line in Odisha, we would still have probably the largest decline in the whole country, but it would not be 25% decline. So I go back to what Professor Panagaria said, that perhaps we need to have two lines. One is for abject poverty, because certainly the current poverty line only really defines very, very sort of survival levels, and perhaps a more sort of acceptable, more socially acceptable poverty line of what we expect people to have. And this is the crux of the debate we've been having for the past 48 hours, because without having a more acceptable poverty line, you get into all these arguments whether you can get a meal for 5 rupees or not, and the reality is you can't.
Sanjay Jha, last comment to you. Was it in a sense a mistake for the government to have not considered or not forced the Tendulkar report earlier on? There was so much political controversy. People came on, the government came and said, look, the numbers that he came out with, no, they were too low, we need to revise it. Was this because of political pressure? Because the next report that comes out is only going to be in 2014, but a lot of our panelists this evening say that there is a great deal of merit in the numbers which have already come out.
Vishnu, I want to tell you that I'm extremely delighted that you have had Professor Panagria as well as Professor Alag on the panel, because as Mr. Panagria correctly mentioned, that Jay Panda was saying, well, we don't want to politicize it, but the truth is, if you take, whether you take the international $1.25 of extreme poverty or $2 for moderate poverty and benchmark it at purchasing power parity, actually the qualifying rate, Vishnu, is 22 rupees. In which case we could statistically claim that even much more number of people are below the poverty line. This is the same government, Vishnu, to answer your question, which has acknowledged that yes, we want to see if we can actually raise the bar, which is why the Rangarajan committee may raise it by whatever amount, we don't know. But the truth, as Mr. Alag and Mr. Panagri have mentioned, that the rate of decline in poverty has been simply phenomenal. It is something that we need to be proud of. The second point that we need to recognize, the UPA in making the food security bill has actually made the accessing of benefits more universal. For example, even if 21% is the level of people below the poverty line, we are going to extend the benefit as a right to food, as an entitlement, to 67% of India's population. As other benefits, barring pensions, everything is now a universal social benefit. So these are humongous changes, and I am so glad that Professor Panagiri has put it in perspective. Obviously, we are being transparent about bringing about a change. And to answer Jay Panda's point, Orissa may have had a higher rate of decline, but still has over 30%.
I need to end this discussion where we actually started it.
Congress is touting the so-called higher rate of decline on poverty. On the other hand, they say they are going to give food grains at heavily subsidized or free food grains to 67% of people who live in India.
That's a right to food. That's a right to entitlement.
All right.
I think you haven't understood what Professor Panda said.
I think it's important that we've raised or we've tried to understand a lot of these important. Lalita, we can go on. We can go on with the political tu meh. I'm sure there'll be a lot of time to actually do that. But these are important economic points that have actually been made in all of this. But I think I'd like to end this particular debate.
At all. I'm just saying that on the one hand, we say that poverty levels have declined spectacularly. On the other hand, we say that we are going to provide subsidized food grains.
Vishnu, both of you are going on with the points you are mentioning, and we can certainly debate poverty later on.
May I say something?
But I think at the end, I think that the last point is comments that food, a meal can be bought for 5 rupees or a meal can be bought at 12 rupees. I'm pretty sure our panelists over here would realize that it's just not possible. That these are specific points, we've had reporters go there, comments like this take away from a fundamentally important discourse that all of us face in India. It's time now for us to take this short break. Well, on now to our next big focus on the buck stops here. 5 brothers and their sister were banished from their home by villagers in Pratapgarh in Uttar Pradesh, ostracized by their own relatives. Why? Because they had lost their parents to AIDS. They had no choice but to take refuge in a tent next to the grave of their parents. Depressed and dejected, not a single person reached out to them with help. Now the state government has acted after this NDTV report.
Discarded by their own relatives and shunned by the village after they lost their parents to AIDS. These children, 4 brothers and a sister, the eldest 21 years old, the youngest only 7, lived in a graveyard for 2 months in a makeshift tent. This 12-year-old is at a loss for words when we ask him how they came to live in squalor right next to his parents' grave.
अच्छा ये बता पहली बार किसने कहा तुम लोगों को कि तुम लोग इस घर में मत रहो, किसने कहा और क्यों कहा? तुम लोग ने फिर उसको पलट के कुछ कहा कि हम लोग नहीं रहना चाहते अपने घर में? क्या कहा तुम लोगों ने? किसने कहा पहली बार?
But the youngest of the siblings, too young to understand the stigma of AIDS, was more forthcoming.
हमारे पापा को एड्स हो गया था, खत्म हो गया, फिर 2 साल बाद हमारी अम्मी खत्म हो गई, फिर हम सब लोग परिवार में रहते थे, हमको भी निकाल दिए कहीं इनके भी न हो जाए, फिर हम सब लोग यहाँ रहते हैं तंबू तान के, और क्या कहते हैं खाने के लिए कहीं दे देता है तो खा लेते हैं.
The villagers didn't help either. They stopped their children from playing with them, warned them of consequences if they came anywhere near their homes.
यही सब पूरा गांव डर रहा है कि डर के मारा कोई हमारा बच्चा मर जाएगा, हम मर जाएंगे, इसके लिए दूर रहो.
तो इसलिए वहाँ आप लोगों ने छोड़ रखा है?
हाँ, इसलिए पूरा इनके खानदान निकाल दिए हैं, तो पूरा गांव वाला छोड़ दिया है.
But today a new hope for these children. After NDTV reported their bizarre banishment, the Chief Minister stepped in and promised them a house and 1 lakh for each one of them.
तात्कालिक रूप से जो स्थानीय लोग हैं उनके सहयोग से, प्रशासन के सहयोग से हमने वहाँ पर एक छप्पर वगैरह डाल के जहाँ पर है वो हमने बना दिया है, उसमें लोग तत्काल रह सकते हैं. उसके बाद से दूसरी समस्या थी इनके खाने पीने की, शिक्षा दीक्षा की. उसके लिए फिर हमने शिक्षा दीक्षा के लिए 2 जो छोटे बच्चे हैं जो अभी स्कूल जा रहे हैं, तो उनको हम लोग जो आवासीय हमारा विद्यालय होता है कस्तूरबा गांधी, उसमें उनको शिफ्ट कर रहे हैं. आदेश हो गया है. बच्चों से ये बात की दे सेट कि हम जा सकते हैं, हमें कोई दिक्कत नहीं, हम पढ़ना चाहते हैं. उसके अलावा 3 और हैं. एक तो वयस्क है जो काम करना चाहता है, उसको हम लोग काम देंगे.
HIV के 4 कारण हैं.
An AIDS awareness exercise for the villagers was hurriedly organized.
पर ज्यादातर क्या है?
And blood samples of the children were taken for the HIV test. The results came out negative, and the fears that caused their exile were finally laid to rest. The doors of their grandmother's house were now open to them.
तो जांच में रिपोर्ट भी जो है वो कह रही है कि कोई बीमारी नहीं है इनको. तो अब आप लोग रखने के लिए तैयार हैं?
हाँ बिल्कुल रहा घर में भाई, कहाँ रही हैं, जब तक घर बने न वो तब तक रही हैं.
These children were abandoned by everyone. Even their own relatives did not offer them any food or shelter. This incident shows how a general sense of apathy and an ignorance about AIDS turned an entire village and families against these voiceless and harmless children who were left with no choice but to silently suffer the stigma for several months. With camera person Ramesh Verma and Kamal Khan in Pratapgarh, this is Anand Zanane for NDTV.
And Anand joins us now for more on this story. Anand, what I just noticed now was that last comment of the grandmother, that she is willing to take these children back, but no, it seems as if she's not interested in taking them back permanently. She's waiting for the government house to be made. Is there still a sense of fear in that village? Is anybody in that village convinced that, look, these children need to be brought back into the fold irrespective of whether or not they have AIDS, and incidentally they don't?
Well, yes, Vishnu, in a sense, it took a lot of effort to drive home the point that what these villagers were doing to these children was absolutely wrong. And that was something that had to be, done as an intervention, not just by the district administration, but even we had to tell these people that AIDS is a disease which is not, something which is a communicable disease. And what they're doing to these children is absolutely inhuman. You cannot force 5 brothers and sisters out of their homes and force them to live in a makeshift tent right next to the grave of their parents. And when we reached there, when we asked these people whether they thought this was perhaps right, they said perhaps this was the only thing that was appropriate, because they always had this sense of fear that they could also end up with AIDS. And now perhaps the biggest challenge for the administration is to ensure that this intervention that they have made by means of spreading awareness amongst locals, by ensuring through follow-up that this is not repeated with these children again. That is something that has to be followed up adequately and supplemented with follow-up measures, and that is something that everyone will be eagerly watching at this point in time, because clearly people are still not convinced. The grandmother, as you rightly pointed out, that she is right now only conditionally allowing them to stay into that house. Once that Lohia Gram Vikas house is available to these children, they will shift there, and whether the grandmother will continue to support them, whether the extended family will continue to support them, that remains a question. So a general change of mindset is absolutely necessary, which is what the administration and the local community has to also ensure that is set in place, so that these people continue to not live in stigma as they have been for the past several months.
And when you reported the story, you found these children, particularly the youngest ones, right? The youngest one is 7, I believe, in a state of shock, not knowing what to say or what to do, stunned by the loss of both parents on the one hand, and being completely unable to communicate what is happening, and victims of stigma.
Indeed, Vishnu, when we first started talking to these children, there were just sobs and tears rolling down their cheeks, and that was the kind of response we got from them when we actually stepped in over there, and when we heard from the Chief Minister announcing a 5 lakh rupee compensation for these children, and also a house and a BPL card. And later towards the end, when they actually shifted to their grandmother's face, their home, there were smiles on their faces. So clearly they were looking forward to some sort of help. Their plight was unreported, unnoticed completely, and that really sums up what happened. Perhaps what these children really needed was someone to reach out to them, and nobody in their village was willing to do that.
Well, hopefully their future will now be a lot more secure than it's been in the recent past. Thank you very much for joining us, Anand, with that. Well, let's continue our focus on this. Joining us now, Ashok Rao Kavi, the chairman of the Humsafar Trust, and Shanta Sinha, child rights activist. Thank you both very much for joining us. Mr. Kavi, you heard that story, you possibly saw it. How do you react to that? Because this is not a one-off case at all. So many children suffer this god-awful stigma which exists on HIV positive patients or AIDS patients, and the sense that everybody else in that entire area is somehow or the other going to fall in. And children are the worst victims in a sense.
There's a saying in Bombay that it is not HIV/AIDS that really kills you, it's the stigma and discrimination. And in this case, here are children who are not even infected. It's their parents who are infected and who have died of AIDS because possibly they didn't get access to medicine. But people like me have been saying since 2006 that stigma and discrimination can only be eliminated if there are laws, that fight it. It's very important. Since 2006, the law, the HIV/AIDS bill has been formulated. It's been discussed with communities at risk. It's discussed with HIV positive women. It's discussed with gay men. It's discussed with MSM, Hijras. it's discussed with all the high-risk groups. And yet the saddest part is that it is just not becoming law, in the sense it's not going through Parliament. There seems to be, it seems to become a tennis ball between the Home Ministry and the Law Ministry, and we just don't know what's happening, because the stigma and discrimination are going to be very difficult to eliminate. 30 to 40 years into the epidemic, if we are seeing something like this that you're seeing at Pratapgarh, it's a very sad commentary on the work of not just the development agencies, because many of us, like the Humsafar Trust for example, we only work among gay men, having sex with men, and hijras. We don't work with women and children. There are other NGOs, but it speaks of volumes that we have not been able to fight the stigma and discrimination in the general population, and neither has the government. So you know what really worries me is that there's no way forward but the HIV/AIDS bill, and we have been saying that since 2006, that this bill, which is very, very comprehensive, is just, it doesn't seem
is anybody listening? That's the bigger question.
We are hoping that during this monsoon.
Shanta Sinha, let me ask you this. You know, this particular story reminds me of a story which we reported a few years back of two children, Bensi and Benson, two children in Kerala. I don't know if you remember about this story, but children who had HIV/AIDS and who were thrown out of their school. The Chief Minister then ensured they got back to the school, but when they got back to the school, all the other parents withdrew their kids. And this is in one of our most literate states, right, in Kerala. How does one overcome stigma which is so deeply, deeply set in across our country, one would assume?
May I?
First of all, I must tell you.
Yeah, Shantaji, go ahead.
First of all, I must tell you, I am greatly relieved that these children have been respectfully rehabilitated and that they need to be followed up. I think it is so important that the AIDS Control Society as well as the district collectors make a record of all those who are undergoing treatment and see what is happening to their children, those who are infected as well as affected. It's not a secret, everybody knows who it is, and it is so important that we see that these children are rehabilitated properly. This is an alert signal. There is so many times we get alert signals. It's time that we track each and every family and see that they are rehabilitated properly. It's not enough that this particular family is rehabilitated. And the stigma, I must tell you, is, you know, this is something that is new. HIV and AIDS are new, and the stigma that has come to it is new. It's got nothing to do with tradition. It's got nothing to do with culture of backwardness or past. And I'm amazed that these kinds of messages which are wrong, incorrect, immoral spread so fast, whereas messages which are correct, moral, and where people will have to take ethical stands don't seem to be spreading at all. There is something wrong with the society that can easily absorb an unethical message but will not absorb an ethical message.
Mr. Kavi, as we close this program, the one point that strikes me is that when there are drugs which are available at subsidized prices, multi-drug treatment ensures that the level of infection of HIV patients can be brought down to a level where it's almost undetectable. The lifespan of a person can be increased indefinitely at this rate. Despite this availability, we in India are still at the level of stigma when we have medical treatment which is available.
Just to tell you the way it's progressing, if you will observe that within the communities at risk, for example among MSM, ID users, sex workers, there's a very clear relief that a medicine is available, but is not available to everybody. So when you say that there is medicine available, for example ART, the cost has come down, the first line treatment has come down to just 1,200, between 800 to 1,200, and yet it's not available to everybody, for the simple reason there are strict protocols that your CD cell count must go down to that much, then only you will have access to it. And that's not, that's what kills you, because the stigma and discrimination attached to that, coupled with the fact that you're not having access to this free ART treatment that government hospitals are supposed to give you and are giving you, whenever they have it, but then the supply is not consistent. They can give you for 6 months and suddenly they say they're out of supply, they don't have it. And then what happens? The person develops resistance to ART, or he develops resistance, so the HIV comes back in a more vicious form, and then he may require second line treatment, which is much more expensive. It's about $3,500 a month, and for a country, I mean, the average price, the average salaries in my office of the clients is around $8,000 a month. So they just can't afford these treatments. If the government doesn't give them, they're dead. So it's not just the stigma and discrimination, and what you say, yes, the medicine is there. Yes, it's there out in the market. India is the place, the factory of the world, where Brazil, South Africa, Uganda
it has to reach people who are affected. I think that's the point
to it. But we don't have it.
that you're mentioning. Well, look, we've run out of time completely. But I mean, there's one positive note we can end with this program, and that these children are going to now be protected. Hopefully the UP government has taken note of it. They're going to have a proper roof on their heads, proper homes. Will their families actually look after them from here onwards? That's the big question.
No, I'm not so hopeful about that village. That village requires repeated presentations on how this disease or this infection is transmitted.
That is something that's going to happen, and this is just one case study. There must be so many other villages like this. I'd like to thank both of you for joining us on this program, a critical issue, and hopefully something will happen. Hopefully the lives of those children will be protected. It's time now for this short break.
Thank you very much.